welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast spotlights. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And today we have two very special guests, longtime listeners and friends of the show, Chicken on a Stick, Patrick and Maggie. Welcome in, everyone.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Patrick and Maggie, God, it's been like, 2 or 3 years since we've known each other, I think?
Yeah, that probably sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Time flies.
Yeah, so and I've wanted to have you guys on the show for a while, was just trying to figure out the perfect one, and especially with being on your guys' show and wanting to talk about musicals again, because that seems to be the topic that keeps getting brought back up, and also serendipitously you had Cabaret for your movie club this month, so
That's right.
Tommy ends up fitting in perfectly with this, so I just gave the movie away.
You did.
But real quick, Patrick and Maggie, introduce your guys' selves and what is Chicken on a Stick?
You go ahead.
Okay. Well, we are just a couple that got together because we love movies and then decided we should talk about movies because our opinions are very important and everybody should take it seriously.
1,000,000%.
So we stream on Twitch pretty much every Friday where we review a newly released film that was in theaters. Mm-hmm. I watch a billion movies because I have brain rot.
Yes.
And she likes horror movies and I hate them. An allegation I'll never beat.
Also, our 6-year anniversary is this week, and our first movie that we went to was, do you remember?
Yeah.
What was
Don't
it?
worry. He won't get far on foot.
Joaquin Phoenix movie.
Not familiar with that. I haven't seen a lot of Joaquin Phoenix's movies, to be honest.
I don't think it was very widely well received, or I don't know.
Yeah, I actually don't know.
I don't know. But yeah, so we've been movie fanatics since day one.
That's awesome.
I feel you. That's how Chris and our friendship was built, was through movies and true crime. So
True.
Yeah.
It's been a fun time.
It's a good base for a relationship.
So, as I spilled the beans a little bit earlier, we're doing the movie Tommy. Very odd movie, and in rare form, I'm going to quote IMDb because it's the most concise and most accurate for this weird-ass film.
For what you need to get across.
Yes. Tommy is about a psychosomatically blind, deaf, and mute boy who becomes a master pinball player and subsequently the figurehead of a cult.
And for those of you who were not already watching this movie, that's going to sound really familiar. That's because it is really familiar. It's based off of The Who.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, actually written by The Who, screenplay by Ken Russell, rock opera by Peter Townshend, and additional material by John Edelweiss and Keith Moon, directed by Ken Russell. It stars Roger Daltrey as Tommy, Anne Magritte as Nora, Oliver Reed as Frank, which that was a huge surprise for me. And last but not least, a very small appearance by Elton John as the Pinball Wizard.
Yeah.
And Tina Turner.
And Tina Turner.
Yeah.
Tina Turner.
Right.
Yep.
And Eric Clapton.
And Eric Clapton.
And Eric Clapton.
Yeah, actually, Tina Turner is the reason we found this movie in the first place when we were doing our research for Beyond Thunderdome.
I love Tina Turner. She always, every movie she's in tickles my fancy.
I love Tina Turner.
I'm curious, because I know, Patrick, you're a bit more into musicals than I know I am, and I don't know if you're as super into musicals as he is, Maggie, but...
I think I like musicals a good deal.
Okay.
Arguably more than you.
Had you heard about this movie before I suggested we review it?
Yes.
Okay, I figured as much.
Yeah, I know The Who. Growing up, my stepdad, that's like his genre of music. So I knew Pinball Wizard since I was a really young age, and then eventually learned that there was a movie about it.
Yeah.
I've just literally never got around to watching it.
When I was a kid, I don't remember how old I was, but I remember us renting, I believe we rented it from a Blockbuster, and it was a VHS of Tommy. And I don't think I had any idea who The Who was, and I'd never seen a movie like this before. And I just remember being like, what is this? What are we watching? And when we started to rewatch it, I was starting to think that I was getting the movie confused with something else, because I was like, I swear to God, Elton John's in this movie. But now I don't think that's right. And then sure enough, there he was. And I was like, I was right. Got it.
when I had the lads watch this movie, I specifically forbade them from looking up who was in the movie because I wanted them to be surprised by all these famous stars and musicians that just
are in there.
Yeah, exactly. Because honestly, for me, the biggest surprise was Oliver Reed, who's what's his character in Gladiator?
Antonius Praximo.
Yeah.
Or Proximo, or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I forgot Tina Turner was in it at all.
No, I was honestly surprised by this one because as we talked on your show, I'm famously not super into musicals, even though I do watch them. They're just not my like go-to or my preferred one. And
not your vibe.
No, usually not. Although I watched 3 musicals in a weekend because of Tommy, and they were kind of on my backlog. I watched. I went and did the usual, and I went to watch some Japanese musicals. I rewatched Tokyo Tribe, and I watched very, very weird one called Underwater Love. So,
ooh, I don't think I've heard of those.
You were going in one direction with musicals, and then you just turned a hard right into a completely different genre of musical, and you managed to somehow in your mind be like, Tommy was the leading connection between those.
I was going to say, that's not what I was expecting. Right. I thought you were going to say, like, Moulin Rouge.
Color Out of Space would have been closer.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's me, so it's not going to be normal. So, like, to not go into it, it's a Pink film, if that tells you too much.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
These are the ones that get locked in the closet with guests come over.
Yeah, it's not surprising if you know what he watches.
Oh.
Yeah, so because we've talked actually quite a bit about musicals. I wanted Patrick, if you could go and update everyone on your definition of the different genres of musical, because I know you have like your 3 categories that usually, like you say, people when they say they don't like musicals, they haven't found the right type of musical, and I fall into that camp where I know which style I like.
Right.
I like the way you say it better.
So this firmly comes off of kind of just making things up out of thin air, in the sense of I'm so used to people saying they don't like musicals, and almost every time somebody says they don't like musicals, if I'm like, well, like, which ones don't you like? Like, what have you seen that you don't like? And it's always like the same handful of musicals. It's going to be like, oh, Singing in the Rain, West Side Story, all these ones where just somebody breaks out and starts dancing and singing in the middle of the movie.
Right.
And I always just had replied with, well, that's not, like, that is one, like, set of types of musicals. Almost certainly, there are musicals you've watched that you actually love that you just don't think are musicals. And a lot of those will come back to people in our age range of the Disney Renaissance. All of Disney's very famous popular movies are musicals. The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Hercules, Lion King, so on and so forth. They're all musicals. People love them. They just don't think of them as musicals as much as they just think, well, it's a kid's movie. Of course they're singing.
Yeah.
Sure, definitely, probably, but it is a musical. So I've always just said, I've kind of just split them up really into like 3 general tiers. You can certainly get much more specific with it and even probably take it further than I do. But I always just like to think, because in the 20s, with the advent of sound film, musicals really exploded because just talking wasn't good enough. Now you could actually basically see a stage play at the theater for, a nickel or whatever it was costing. New experience. Right. So,
well, and I mean, back then, that was when film was being made in, like, you got brought sound. Everyone who was on stage was a multifaceted talent. They weren't just an actor. They could act, they could sing, they could usually dance, or do at least 2 of those 3. Yeah. And on top of that, that is where like movies stem from, was old stage plays. That's why we have the very stiff Parsinian framing until they're like, well, hey, these cameras are light enough, we can put them on rails or we can rotate them to get different effects.
Light enough being a loose word, and they were heavy as hell.
Right. Yeah, and that's the whole reason that, just kind of as an offshoot real quick, the second ever winner of Outstanding Picture, which would later become Best Picture at the Oscars, is A Broadway Melody, which is a musical, which is just an adaptation of a stage play. Right. That's where the musicals that I think that people don't like That's what that falls into. I'd refer to that as sort of like a stage play. It's kind of like a big ensemble thing. They're going to break out into dancing. They're going to break out into song. The song may or may not have anything to do with moving the plot forward in any sort of sense of the way. Like Moulin Rouge could fall into that category, though it's a jukebox musical and they're just singing like random popular songs or whatever. It's still like they just randomly start singing and dancing at any given moment. And then you have I just usually call them like more modern musicals, but there's probably like maybe like a narrative musical might be a better term, where the songs that they're singing, they're not necessarily breaking out into dance or song number, but they're singing to advance the plot in some sort of way, or it's woven into the story more cohesively, not just kind of randomly, whatever.
Like La La Land, right?
Sure, kind of.
No,
not like La La Land.
More like Sing Street.
More like Sing Street is what I would go with. I love Sing Street. I think Sing Street's a great example of that. But yeah, and then you get kind of things that sort of fall in the middle, which is probably, again, those can be like the Disney category, where maybe it is a kid's movie, maybe it's not. The songs do maybe advance the plot to some degree, but they also are just kind of breaking out and singing and dancing. But they're generally more approachable than the stage ones that are, Singing in the Rain,
right?
The big West Side Story, whatever.
More
stuff
theatrical.
Like that. Sure. But yeah, but a lot of animated movies are going to fall into the category of basically the Disney movies, the Disney musical, essentially. Like I said, kind of an offshoot of the Disney Renaissance, popularizing that. Shrek would fall into that sort of stuff, where they've got song numbers going on all the damn time, people singing whatever. Shrek 2, I Need a Hero. Fantastic scene.
That is a banger.
That's covered.
Yeah.
Absolute banger.
And I think Chris and I have discovered another category that will add on to it, because I think it more so stems from like the musicals like Forest the Lads that I stumble upon, where it's technically a musical, but like the musical portion is barely a part of it, like Burst City, where it technically has some musical elements, and it's a big part of, like, it falls kind of under Sing Street, but it gets quickly glossed over because it really is just like a concert. It's not like it does, and part of it doesn't really drive the plot either. So it's just kind of like
true.
The musical's there.
It's shoehorned in a little bit.
Yeah, which is interesting because I want, like, with Tommy, I was sitting while I was working today trying to figure out like where Tommy falls into it, because it definitely heavily falls into that old school style of musical, but at the same time it doesn't. And I think that's what's interesting about this one, is because they do so much psychedelic and weird stuff with it that we don't really see in like those other types of musicals, like going back to La La Land, where it's a lot of dance numbers. This one has like maybe 2, if you consider Tina Turner's part a dance.
I do consider Tina Turner's part a dance. How dare you?
Yeah.
I think Tommy is a really great example of like how you can subcategorize the whole like Broadway version of them. Like Broadway is very much like a standard musical where you have song and then you have talking and acting and plot and then another song, and you just kind of keep washing and repeating until you get to the end. Whereas with Tommy, and honestly a couple of others, and Rock really did help like reinvent, like revive this style. It's more of an operatic where everything is song, everything is sung. There's no time to have that back and forth, which makes it feel much more Broadway. And I mean, 70s rock, half of them were just operas. Like even they call it an opera. So I think that's where you can like have that breakdown of like the different subcategories. This is still like the Broadway style, like you were saying, but like it's subclassed into the operatic, which maybe some people would prefer over. I know you seem to like the opera style ones better, because at least there's not like, there's less stupid music usually.
I do think Tommy is almost an outlier, and that I think, from what I understand from the creation of Tommy, because it seems to very widely be considered the first actual rock opera, that whatever experimental weird shit that the drugs they were on were making them go through when they did this, or when Pete Townsend did this, it certainly is almost straight up an experimental movie that just has the music from their album to it. It's almost like it literally could have just been a concert film, and you could have had basically the same exact thing, because you wouldn't have dialogue or anything to carry between the different songs that they're playing or whatever. They could just go song to song to song.
What was the Beatles one? Across the Universe?
Yeah, but that's a jukebox musical.
Okay.
Across the Universe is the new one, but they had a few.
Was it Yellow Submarine one?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's like Hard Day's Night and some other
It's been a
Beatles
while
related
since I've
movie
seen
stuff.
it. I couldn't remember if there was a lot of dialogue throughout it or not.
There is.
Not a ton, but
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting because from what I've seen of Ken Russell, the director's work, this movie honestly fell perfectly into his lap. There's one of his movies I still need to see called The Devils, which is based on the story of the Nuns of Loudun, which was these group of nuns in France who kind of went crazy and thought they were having relations with the devil.
The fuck?
Yeah, it's a weird whole story that it's just it's an episode of mass hysteria.
so they say.
So they say. But Ken Russell went to go on to direct a movie that I really like called Altered States that is very trippy and kind of mind-bending as well. So he's done that's kind of like his area, at least of like the 3 or 4 movies of his I've seen. So it's
Sure.
It's
kind of like his niche.
Yeah.
Well, and also like how perfect, like The Who definitely perfected to an extent the like idea of like a rock opera, because originally they weren't necessarily movies, they were just like the album. I mean, Tommy is a rock opera album that then got turned into a movie.
Yeah
And like they perfected that for sure, but they were by no means the only people doing that. I mean, Queen, famously one of the best rock operas of all time, like it was just like the thing to do.
Yeah, there was that folk dude in the 70s who made a whole concept album for Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, no, like doing this whole like idea of like storytelling in your album, like 60s, 70s, and then kind of into like the early 80s was like such a popular idea that it was just a matter of time before we stuck visuals to it. And like it worked out so good with The Who, because like where the Beatles are super psychedelic and almost you lose plot with a lot of their movies, at least this one, like, you know what the theme is because the song tells you very blatantly what the theme is.
Okay. Well, on the subject of the music, Patrick, you had said that this is some of the stuff you kind of grew up with. How was it going from the soundtrack, from the actual CD to, or like the original sound to the movie sound? Because when I went through it and did the reverse, I don't like I don't like the original album. I like the movie soundtrack much better.
So the only song there's maybe 1 or 2 songs on there that I think that I knew beforehand, because especially when we were watching the movie, I was like singing the chorus. I was like, I feel like I've definitely heard this before, and it's very likely I did. I just don't really remember them. But the only one I knew like 100% is Pinball Wizard.
The most famous one, definitely.
Right. But when I went back and listened to the full album, a lot of the songs I do think I prefer what they did in the film with them. And a number of things are definitely also rearranged and altered from the original album to the actual movie. And I think probably works a little bit better, especially the way they've kind of melded some of the like really, really short tracks to be kind of interwoven in between some of the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that is one thing I read with Russell, is he said he did interject, rearrange, and added little bits that where he thought that the plot from the original CD didn't work very well.
Oh yeah, definitely. You have to, because like they originally, like the original album Tommy, and like I grew up listening to Tommy. I had very, very into rock family members who were like, "This is the music that you shall consume, child."
Right.
And so like some of the songs like from the album, like they were very much like still trying to figure out how to do some really great storytelling with it. And like Tommy's a good example of like how it could end up being really great, because like the movie works really well, the rearranging does work really well, but I know some people are going to hate it that I say it, but I don't think Tommy is like the album is the perfect example of rock opera storytelling, because there's a lot of details that like the songs don't get correct in the first place, so like that's why a lot of it had to be reworked. There's like some backwardsness on like, why would so and so be motivated to be the murderer? What, like, obviously it makes more sense for this person to be the killer, or like this person to be the like interest of, you know, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Maggie? What did you think of the music? Have you listened to the Who's album before, or was
it had been a long time. My parents were really, really big into it. They were really big into blaring rock music and stuff when we were kids, and that's why they got us to watch that, you know, when we were little. But I think I agree that I do maybe kind of like the music in the movie better than the original, but it's been so long too. So I don't know. I think I enjoy it, and I enjoy how much it did set that precedence for other movies to do those odysseys.
Yeah, I can say I think what it is that the movie has such a wide range of sound compared to the soundtrack or the original album, because that original album is very much kind of the same constant tone across the entire song. You don't have the Tina
Turner did a lot of work there, didn't she?
And also with Elton John having his own little flair with it.
Sure.
That's my favorite part with Elton John. He's the best.
So going into the actual movie itself just a little bit, I was surprised with, and I don't know, I guess I've never really experienced like a rock opera outside of like the Trans-Siberian Orchestra and going to see their show, and my mom had a production of it when I was really little.
That's cool.
Oh yeah, no, it was really cool. She actually got to it was for our church, and she got to talk to, who is it, Eric Lloyd Webber who does it? Yeah, well, talk to him and get the sheet music, and she's like, it's only going to be for this small show. We're not going to do anything else with it. And he's like, okay, cool.
Oh, see, I got to see them live, and I've been to a lot of rock concerts before I, you know, deemed that I was too cool to go out and do things like that. But I have been to many a show with many pyrotechnics, and Trans-Siberian Orchestra was the closest to taking my eyebrows off out of all of them. And I was in the bleachers, like in the back.
Yeah. But
I mean, that's a little impressive and scary.
It was like amazing, but also like the strangest experience of having so much pyrotechnics, so much laser shows for violin music.
Well, and that's what I feel like Tommy, if it was done as a stage play, would be heavy pyrotechnics, heavy.
So many lasers.
Yeah, lasers is the thing I was thinking.
Like fog machine on nonstop.
Yeah, when I went into Tommy, I honestly, when I saw it was listed as a musical, I was honestly surprised there wasn't any dialogue for the first 5 minutes of this movie, and it's just all orchestra. And it's an interesting way because it's kind of back to the old way of showing, not telling, and giving you the entire backstory of kind of everything leading up to the death of the father, and then everything after that, you get the music.
Yeah.
Or singing. You get the singing.
I would say singing, because Prologue 1945 is definitely a song from the original album. Because the Who were kind of...
an altered song.
It definitely... Oh, yes, very altered.
Because the album originally is about the 20s, and they've upped it to be modern to the 70s. So, yeah, it's like 45 or whatever it was.
Yeah. I mean, everything in this... like. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad they updated it, because otherwise, let's be honest, who hasn't wondered about the pinball wizard child and how he got there?
I don't know, because I didn't really know the song as a kid. I didn't know what the pinball wizard really was. I'd heard it, but I'd never... Oh,
you didn't sit there and analyze the lyrics and wonder to yourself about this magical child who played pinball via vibes alone?
The only Who song I really knew up until a few months ago was Who Are You?
Who are you?
The one where they just sing their own name?
Yeah.
We got a big NCIS fan in here. That's what it is.
Yeah. No, CSI, Crime Scene Investigator. Thank you very much.
The original.
Was it Crime Scene? I don't know. It's one of those cop shows.
That's the intro song for ages.
Whatever. He takes his glasses off. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
What it was to.
Wow.
It was one of the few modern shows we had in Germany, so that's where I watched it. So.
Understandable.
But and honestly, like from the get-go, this movie is visually interesting. There's so many like little, because you knowing that where the pinball is going, there's so many pinballs everywhere in this stupid movie at times.
Oh yeah.
That didn't even click to me the first time we watched it. I didn't even, it just in my head, nothing went through that while she's loading these pellets into these, like, I don't know, giant bullets or whatever you'd call them, until the second time I went, oh, they're pinballs. No, duh.
Yeah, and then as he like starts to lose his sight and stuff, and he goes into like that little bit of a vision quest of his dad crucified on an airplane, there's pinballs bouncing around everywhere too. So
they had a theme and they stuck with it.
Which I do really think is kind of cool because really, and I've been thinking about it, the movie does try really hard to set up what I'm assuming is the British dream at times, just a loving husband and child.
Is the British dream not just tea?
I don't know how hard they were trying to set up anything in the beginning, because I'm still confused by some of the imagery during that opening montage of that whirlwind relationship and him going off to war. I just want to know that it was explained somewhere why there was a gaggle of like cabaret dancers and gas masks running through the street. What was that?
What the fuck was that?
No idea.
Oh, no, it's because it's the bombing of World War II. If you've watched Doctor Who, Are You My Mummy?
Yes, the gas mask isn't the question, it's the cabaret that's the question.
Yeah, why are they naked, basically?
I feel like we looked at each other at that point.
Are we bombing strip clubs? What is the connotation of these poor ladies having to rush from work in the gas mask?
And they now I'm no expert in gas masks, but they left their feather caps on.
Yeah.
They sure did. I do feel like that might compromise the seal.
What's the term? Maybe they're butter faces?
Could be.
I'm sure gas mask plus cabaret is somebody's thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at My Bloody Valentine.
True. Yeah, we did have a whole episode where we talked about
that. Good point.
I just like the idea of one of those girls going home and like their boyfriend or husband is like, so how was work today? And they're like, well, I wore something very interesting.
And also work is no more. They bombed it. Like,
I think they bombed it, so well done.
Or she comes back and he's like, that stays on tonight.
Yeah. Wow. We found my kink.
They're like in the same. I get visually like having the constant panning shot, but like it's so strange seeing these cabaret girls running out because like essentially we were in this couple's backyard because their house has been cut in half essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So is it implied that they live in like next door to a strip club? Like
maybe it's to show that they're kind of on like the seedier side of town, and that's what the summer camp offers is a brighter future compared to living on the back alley.
I hope so, but I think all of the town is the seedy side when it's all flattened.
I would agree with that. It's all seedy now.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, that I think maybe it's just to like start punching little holes into like, hey, this is gonna get weird. It's like, okay, that's a weird shot, and then you start getting more and more weird stuff of like the cabin, or like, actually no, the summer camp's kind of relatively standard. It only starts getting weird again once they kill the original father, I think.
So like they're kind of lulling you in slowly, like through the shallow end of the pool to the deep end of the weirdness.
Yeah. I feel like the summer camp scene, especially like with everyone getting off the bus and introducing the new guy to the movie, it's almost like a standard like musical version again with the way it's shot and like the overabundance of people and singing, and thankfully we don't stay here very long, but it's so different than the rest of like what we had just been watching.
Yeah, it's like in Happiness of the Katakuris when they start going into like the dream sequences and stuff where it goes from kind of comedic to just like full on Hollywood style musical.
Yes, it's very over the top with his very greased back hair and his way too many teeth.
He did have a lot of teeth. Too many teeth.
I think we need to bring that look back, to be honest.
No.
It was giving car salesman, but in the worst way possible.
Which says a lot, because they're usually pretty terrible.
Yeah, because, I don't know, maybe you guys had the same reaction once it started going from there and Tommy starts like losing his eyesight and his hearing and then his speech. Like, that whole sequence is just so goddamn all over the place.
I was so confused by this movie watching it the first time. I did not understand, like, okay, meeting Uncle Frank and being a greaser, and then there's a lot of green throughout this movie too, which I definitely noticed on the second watching, that there is a lot of green. I don't know, again, if that's like a symbolism for something or whatever they're trying to make with that. Just a lot of green. But I was so confused with once Uncle Frank and I believe the mother's name is Nora, though I don't think her name is ever said once. I think she's just called Miss Walker. When she gives birth to it's a boy, Miss Walker, or whatever. When they finally like settle down and they put Tommy to sleep, and Tommy's like, oh, I love him even more when he's got his green coat on, and then they leave, I thought Tommy was just like hallucinating seeing his father all like two-faced, burnt up looking thing. Just like go back and read that, no, his father just straight up broke and entered into that home, creepily stared at his child, and then walked into his wife's bedroom to get murdered. That whole sequence is just insane.
Well, and it doesn't relent from there either, because honestly, it just gets more and more bizarre, especially like once he grows up and we're introduced to the Church of Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, yes. Church.
Oh my god, that was so weird.
That's one thing I think this movie does interestingly is it definitely covers it's a little bit of a commentary on a lot of different aspects of, I guess, the what's the right way to say it, the helpless people, the God, I don't know the right term for this.
Just like
Like
religion in general?
No, the vulnerable in general. It's not just the religion. When you have the uncle, the cousin, just the abuse that Tommy that Tommy's put through, and just.
I mean, a classic trope for not just the Who, but rock bands in the 70s, and especially British rock bands in the 70s. Mm-hmm. Like, they were all very into this idea of like how the war affected everybody and the injustice of it all.
Yeah, well. And honestly, because we did a movie earlier this year called The Magic Christian that
feels similar.
Yeah, no, that's exactly why I wanted to bring it up, because we did that one, and that one is even more all over the place. And it's music related because the lead is Ringo Starr.
Yeah.
And there's kind of some musical-ish moments to it too, but it didn't feel as cohesive as a story as this one, because even though this has like little vignettes, I think it's because Tommy is such a central character, mm-hmm. and we are invested in him, because it's like, okay, well, now this kid has no father. Mm-hmm. He's got a horrible stepdad, mm-hmm. kind of an incestuous mother at times.
Yeah, I mean, the mom's definitely not living up to his like ideal version of a family.
Yeah. One question I did have is when Tommy does go blind, deaf, and dumb, are we to think that it's the shock of seeing his father murdered, or is it because Uncle Frank, or I guess stepdad Frank by this point, and mother said, you didn't see anything, you didn't hear anything, you don't know anything, over and over into his face?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of that, because we see that in Shock and stuff of people losing their senses just because trauma will fuck you up, and that's exactly what's happening to Tommy. Is he's shutting himself off from the world as he's kind of losing it.
Whoever wrote the IMDb like synopsis claims that it's because Frank and his mother told him not to see or hear or say anything ever again.
They gaslit him into being crippled. Great.
And I was like, you know what? That's a good enough reason for me for the rest of this film, so sure, why not?
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's a weird... Not a lot of things in this movie do I feel like are exactly explained very well. I think a lot of it is kind of interpretive to some degree. That's just one of the sequences that to me is just like, even on two pretty close repeat viewings, I'm still just like, what exactly is like, what is the root cause of this exactly?
I think I'm gonna go with that now.
I mean, it does kind of make sense though, because if you think about it, like, and I have no proof because I have not interviewed any of these people, and I don't think anyone's bothered to truly ask, but I have a very strong feeling that there was like a good handful of songs that the Who had. They were like, what if we did a whole album tying them together? And then someone was like, what if we did a movie tying all this together? And so, I mean, the fact that any of this goes together is impressive to me.
I actually read a tweet today from Neil Gaiman. Someone asked him, how do you make a story a good story? And he's like, just throw a bunch of stuff together and make it sound like it goes together.
You know, he's not entirely wrong.
And that is the thing, is like this one, while we brought up the Magic Christian and how all over the place that one is,
it is.
This one is all over the place, but in a consistent style, I would say. Just
it at least has one character to focus on.
Exactly. I mean, hell, even there's a little bit of, I guess, commentary, because there's a lot of commentary on consumerism, especially with the Marilyn Monroe cult.
Sure. Drug use with Tina Turner's a little bit.
Well, that, and also like your father's expectations of you to be a man is like,
sure,
hey, you got to get laid to be a man.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's what that was? I was taking that as still part of the movie in which the parents are very clearly grief-stricken in what they did to Tommy, and we get a series of them trying to fix him through weird means of like, let's all wear cute matching outfits and go to a carnival. That'll knock your sense into you, or just you screaming in your face, Tommy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I didn't like that. That was off-putting.
I actually love that scene.
I don't like that.
So I think that's exactly what it is because Frank, even though he's the stepfather, he still has this idea. His son is a reflection of him, and he's stuck with what should have. It's like the dad forcing your son to play football because that's what men do. That's the sport men do, and instead, this is his way of doing it because he can't put Tommy into that because Tommy's blind, deaf, and mute.
Yeah, I also think I fully think it's completely accidentally. But I think the movie Tommy managed to create a very like interesting narrative on like what it's like to have a disabled person or especially a disabled child in your care, and like the lack of like perfect response. Because like obviously people would want, like if that was the commentary, people would want to like say like, oh well, we took him to the best doctors and we got the best help, and somehow I fully agree, like on accident, Tommy the movie managed to like say like, no, people will try anything even if it's really stupid and obviously like bad.
Right.
I do just real quick side note, in the Christmas scene, there are 2 extras in that scene that crack me up. It's both times when they all huddle around Tommy. One of them does like a really weird face for a moment. I don't know why, she just does. And then the second time I caught this girl, she's very clearly looking at like her friend or somebody off like to the side, and then she dead on stares straight at the camera the rest of the time.
Just deadpan.
I specifically love the children in the Christmas scene because they were clearly told to play the instruments annoyingly and march in a circle, and 2 of them have no rhythm. One of them tried to play the trumpet really hard, but then she like couldn't keep up if she was doing that, so she like gives up halfway through the circle. And then one of them isn't even managing to get anywhere near the little drum. They're just like drumming the air in front of them.
I do also find it hilarious that the part of the song is like, if he can't see or hear, how is he going to know who Jesus? Like, do you even know who Jesus is? That the mother thought a great Christmas present for a blind kid was a manger of Jesus's birth, to just be like, here, just touch these porcelain figures and figure it out.
Well, that is something. I mean, so I think Chris and I can relate to that a little bit because that's like that's a big thing with going to architecture school and learning about how stuff's built. You want to go and touch everything because there is a certain feel to it that you get a different sensation from touching a very smooth piece of concrete rather than just looking at it, or the roughness of a brick.
And actually that's a new like accessibility device that a lot of very like big touristy like architectural buildings have started incorporating, is having a 3D printed model for blind people to touch so that they can like visualize the scale and the size and the shape of what they're in. Because like if it's like a cathedral, they can hear how echoey it is. They can probably feel like the air temperature around them, and like people can describe it to them. But how do you know like, oh, it's got wings off to the side, it's got these big arching buttresses? And so like I get what the mom was trying to do with the whole like, oh, well, I bought him this thing that he'll be able to experience the world around him with. But it like goes back to that like imperfect like family dynamic of having a disabled kid where like your priorities maybe are not aligning with like what the kid really needs, which is clearly like medical help.
Right.
What you're saying is he doesn't need Jesus.
I thought you guys were going to say we touched a manger in school. So made us do that.
Oh, I did. I did touch a manger in school.
Oh, you did?
I went to a very small like Christian school. So like we actively portrayed the manger every year in school. I was the star.
We did have one of those.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah. We had one of those cheap little manger sets with the porcelain figures and everything.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
No, it is that's the thing that I think is great about this movie is that it is covering all these subjects because it does go heavily into religion of who are you going to worship? I mean,
well, and then like almost the like prophetic nature of having this, to quote the song, deaf, dumb, and blind kid who is, when we find out, not actually deaf, dumb, or blind. He's just having a psychokinetic break. But like because of that, he seems almost like a messiah. So like of course people are going to be like, oh my god, check out this guy who's like so disabled, but he's doing amazing.
He's able to play pinball so well, and I think that is a good point. Is that it's something for some people to rally around, especially, and I think it's a good setting just after World War II when a lot of the country or a lot of the world was lost. I mean, we saw it in architecture with the modernist movement because they didn't want anything to do with the old archaic ways.
Sure. And also just like you do see a difference in religion in general, or starting around the World War II, having much more emphasis on like over the top and big like performances in religion. I don't know specifically about the British side because, you know, I ain't got time, but I know, and at least in the US that was a really big kickstart for what we like, you know, colloquially call like tent churches. So like the snakes, the like speaking in tongues, the like healing hands. Like,
yeah. I forgot that that's what that's called.
Well, I don't know if they want to be called tent churches, but they get to be.
Yeah.
Oh, they probably don't.
Well, and like in Japan after World War II, you have the emperor stepping down, and that's your basic kind of god figure, or your living god figure stepping down, and you have a rise of a lot of cults leading to the most famous one, Aum Shinrikyo.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it changed the world. Everyone's entire worldview was shooken up. So why not have this weird kid be the next Messiah?
Yeah, and maybe this is a dumb take, but when I was watching it the second time around, I'm like, this is just Dune, but like the first two parts of Dune, but condensed, where it's like it's about a Messiah figure, and then it's about why that's not a good thing to be.
I think what you read was the epitome of Christian failure, and both of those are about that.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think it's like Dune. I think both of them have the same root.
Yeah, it's like Dune.
No, it's not. They're both like the one thing.
Well, it certainly has some sort of message to figure out about idolizing celebrity to some degree, especially with the Marilyn Monroe 7-year itch statue.
Why did they have to make
and the weird
like
masks
that?
And stuff? That, from what I read, that was intentional.
Why?
They wanted it to seem
creepy
because it's something to do with like when you start to like idolize or worship like a celebrity or something like that. It tends to skew whoever that person might have been. So they're Marilyn Monroe with the cheap masks and the bad hair and all that stuff. And even some of their clothing was like newspaper articles about her are all like slightly off interpretations of who she actually would have been.
I wonder if it's the same principle as like there's a concept called eyebrow blindness, and it's when you've been looking at like,
oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, where it's like you've been looking at your own face or your like loved one's face so much that you like completely ignore the fact that they've like drawn big old, you know, Naruto sized blocks for eyebrows.
I had that so hard when I was younger. It was bad. It was terrible.
I don't think I've ever heard that.
I mean, and it doesn't just happen with eyebrows. Like I know another like common one that happens to people is like pregnancy nose, because like sometimes when you're pregnant your nose swells up a little bit, and for some people it's a lot of it. And so like people will be like, I didn't notice it, my husband didn't notice it, because like I look at me all day, he looks at me all day, you know, theoretically we're in love. And then like you go back and you look at pictures and you're like, how did no one tell me about this?
It's like when the whole idea of people complaining about, oh, how do they not know Clark Kent is Superman?
It's because they look at Clark Kent all day.
Yeah.
Right.
It's because he wears glasses. What do you mean?
Well, like
I also had
they can't be the same person.
I also had self-tan blindness. Man, when spray tans first came out.
Oh, that one can be so bad.
Oh, I was just a Cheeto.
All I know is this whole revelation of being blind to looking at a person you see all the time means one of these days, and I won't tell you when, I'm going to go full Groucho Marx and put on grease paint mustache and eyebrows and just see if you notice.
Maggie's just going to notice it and not say anything and let you look ridiculous the whole day.
Or she can join you. We can reapply the self-tanner like we did in high school. We can just be such carrot orange.
2007 eyebrows are back, baby.
Yeah, well, and also going back to that cult thing a bit too, is we have basically the rise of two cults in this. We have the Marilyn Monroe, which falls down, kind of a symbol of the old god or the old idol crashing down, caused by the new one. And then on top of that, they do this thing that is very interesting. You see it in a lot of religious cults where when they start growing, when they start bringing in the money is when you get the people who don't have the best interests of the cult in mind, specifically the stepfather who starts merchandising everything, jacking up the prices of everything. And all Tommy wants to do is teach them the ways of pinball.
I also think that, again, without realizing they were doing it, I think the movie managed to create a bit of a narrative on having famous children. And like, it's not as quite one-to-one because like having YouTube families and like children on TV and movies wasn't as a seen thing as it is now. But like, I still think very much that there's like a little bit of a commentary on like using your kids for their fame and their money happening here.
Yeah, and I mean that is the downfall of both of them, because even while the mother is kind of saved initially when he tells her to throw away all her riches and stuff, that's another thing you see with cults is you shut yourself off from the rest of the world. And that's actually the blind, deaf, and dumb part is actually a good point, because that's when it starts getting really bad and when you should get out, when they tell you who you can and can't talk to.
Sure.
But the mother ultimately fails because she doesn't stop the stepfather from going and capitalizing on all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it would have been like something that's kind of in the conscious mind when the movie came out in like 75, I think. Because there was like in the news a handful of famous children. I think by this point it was mostly like the main two who had been murdered. But like it was starting to come out like, oh, your favorite child actor on TV isn't necessarily doing great all the time. Like they're not actually millionaires. Right. Their parents wasted all their money. Or, you know, their dad killed them. You know.
Oh God, don't bring
that
up
one.
that.
That one's a specific. That one's to our generation. But like the 70s, like we're starting to like truly start to see that. And I mean, it's not until later. It's not until like the 90s and the 2000s with like the hyper interest in true crime and also celebrities that we like really got to dig back through and find out that like all these famous actors and actresses like were not treated well at all, or like you know were forced to do this sort of stuff. But like it would have been something that like in 75 people would have been like, it's a little schemy to be using your kid like that.
What was that? What's that documentary that came out that was going back over all of those young actors and musicians and everyone, and we're realizing like, oh shit, they were not treated very well when they were on our like Walt Disney show or Nickelodeon.
Oh, the Nickelodeon one.
Oh, are you talking about?
That one was so interesting.
Yeah.
He was such a schemy man.
But yeah, I imagine like if that had been around at that time, we probably would have found out a lot about a lot of people in Hollywood.
Well, and I think it's just a changing of the times too with everything open. I think it'd be interesting to see Tommy adapted to a modern time frame, just especially with all the cameras that we have now and actual eyes on the celebrities. Because think about when this came out. It's 75 when this came out, about 69 when the original was written. Tabloids, I know they were a thing, but I don't think they were as big as they are now.
I don't think that people found them quite as juicy.
I can actually already see the modern take of this is, well, we start a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
We force him to like open things.
And while I agree they weren't as bad, I will remind you that like this is midway through Princess Diana's life, so like the tabloids were in fact that bad.
Oh,
Yeah.
She was born in 61. She died, unfortunately, in 97.
well, this is set in the 40s, so.
Well, kind of. But I mean, like, it's happening for an audience in the 70s, and it's clearly written for an audience in the 70s. It's, I mean, they're by no means teleporting us to the past.
No. It's just a weird movie. And, I mean, there are some things I'm going to point out that have aged very poorly, in my opinion. The one specifically is The Uncle, where the gay times, that was a...
Fiddling about.
Yeah,
fiddling
that was
about.
a huge thing back in the day where... And I it's on my mind because I'm going through... I just got through last podcast on the left's covering of the Snowtown murders, which they also made they had the quote-unquote thought that gay men were also pedophiles. They weren't separate. They were one and the same. So
an interesting phrase to have in a movie, which, I mean, not starring, but he is predominantly in with Elton John, one of the most famous gay men of all times.
Yeah,
true.
But also, like, this is 75, and I'm not an Elton John fan hard enough to know the full timeline of his life and like where he was.
Right.
But he's always been, as far as I remember, Elton John. Like, we didn't move from, you know, dad styled Elton John into now Elton John. I don't think the boas showed up out of nowhere.
No, he was pretty colorful all the way from the beginning. It feels like.
I do now thinking about it though. The newspaper, the Gay News, does say obscenity triumphs, and then Uncle Frank burns the newspaper.
Yeah, because at this time in England, it was still illegal to be gay.
True. But also, like, it's also the Who.
I feel
like it's got to be a pointed commentary to an extent.
I think so, probably.
What point are we in here during Freddie Mercury's career? Was he?
Where were we during Freddie Mercury?
I was wondering if he was.
Style. I don't
know
if he was still married at the time or not, but I mean, he was a pretty kind of everybody knew.
I think everyone but Freddie
behind
for
the
a
scenes
while.
thing, but
Well, no, this would have been the end of his marriage. 76 was his divorce to marry. So, I mean, this would have been right on that cusp of people like seeing it more and more in the public eye.
Yeah, where it's acceptable, but you like how the military was, don't ask, don't tell.
Sure, but or even just like seeing famous people that you looked up to. Because like I remember my dad talking one time about how like there were people who actively couldn't comprehend that Freddie Mercury was a gay man, and like nowadays you were like, well, look at him, like obviously Freddie Mercury was a gay man, but like there were people who actively were like, no, I mean he was married to Mary, like no, definitely not, absolutely not. So like this definitely would have been on the cusp of like famous people that like you couldn't deny anymore.
Yeah,
like being successful and famous and all that sort of stuff, and also gay.
And you're like, oh, okay.
Sometimes people just have those looks where you're like, yeah, I'm not surprised that person murdered people. Look at his eyes.
But no, that's the thing, isn't it? Like every time that happens, it's always, and maybe it's a version of eyebrow blindness, but like people who are close to those people are like, I didn't see it coming, and everyone else in the world was like, I 100% saw this.
He'd never do that.
No, I think it is the thing though, is generally when you're like, well, look at him, it's clear as day. It's, well, because you already know the news. You already know that this person is this way or did that thing. And then you see him and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. He looks like that.
Well,
yeah.
In that same vein, I wonder if it's their jab at like the punk movement as well, because his cousin's obviously a punk, and definitely. A very old school punk. Yeah. Where I always forget, like when there's old depictions where they're wearing swastikas, and this one specifically, he has an iron cross on, where it's like that used to be the thing. Yeah, but it wasn't like something that they believed in. It was just something to piss off the old people.
Yeah, originally it was, and then it unfortunately morphed and gathered the wrong ones.
Sticking it to the man.
Yeah, his cousin's straight up tries to kill him. So
yeah, maybe not the best example of a good person.
Yeah, maybe it's not okay to leave him with the cousin Kevin.
Kakihara from Ichi the Killer would be pretty dumb.
Yeah, he would.
So, just a few questions I got on this. What are some of your favorite visuals on this? Because we've talked about like how trippy this movie is and how like honestly it is. What's the term? It's candy for the eyes, I'd say.
Definitely. I think there were a lot of scenes that were pretty trippy to me, but no matter how trippy they are, I just have to say that the Elton John scene is just my favorite. It was my favorite part of the whole movie.
With his 40-foot tall boots.
It was so like, weird. What? I literally took a picture, like a screenshot while we were watching it and sent it to my dad and my mom to be like, you remember this? You remember us watching this? And they were like, yeah, that thing was terrifying, but cool.
This is one scene that I hate, and I don't really understand what exactly they're trying to say with it or why it exists to begin with. But after he becomes famous for being a pinball wizard and wins and becomes the pinball champion, his mother is in this pure white room in this, like, I don't remember what it was, but this crazy outfit or whatever. And on TV, she's watching a thing about beans being good for good for the queen or whatever. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but the part after that where the TV explodes into what I assume is supposed to be beans, but doesn't look like beans in any sort of way, and then she decides to mount a giant ass body pillow type thing while rolling around and all this stuff. I don't know what this is supposed to mean, what it's supposed to be. It is unsettling.
You also don't like beans, so I bet that was probably nightmare.
Yeah, I don't like beans, so that's probably also part of it. And also, Tina Turner is terrifying in this.
She's a little terrifying.
I don't know. She is like full-on tweak mode the entire time she's on the screen. I love her song. She delivers it great. But just her expressions of being really wide-eyed and like her mouth is just always gaping open.
And the slightly see-through dress, that is both shapeless and form-fitting all in one go.
Yeah,
all at the same time.
So it is beans, chocolate, and champagne is all that she's rolling around in, which I found out that took like a week.
That makes sense why it looks like the way it does.
Yeah.
Ugh. Well, why the combo?
I don't like the idea of that.
I think I don't know specifically why beans, but I think I know what that scene's supposed to represent is the mom losing herself in consumerism and material things, being deluded by the fame and fortune that's been brought because of her son's plight. And so it's also kind of a point at that point in the movie. It's where the mom really seems torn between how she's treated her son this whole time but sticking around with the man that killed his father.
Right. See, okay, the chocolate and the champagne makes sense to me, especially if we remember that this was supposed to be set after World War II, and those would have been fancy newish luxuries to be able to have again. But beans have been around in Britain, and they've been a staple for way before World War I.
Here's where it's fancy. It's a common thing, but they're fit for the queen.
Sure, but I think this is like saying the tea is fit for the queen. They're British. I expect there to be beans.
Haven't beans been around forever? Even old Western times?
Yes, and tinned beans specifically have been around forever.
Everyone was eating beans out of a can.
I love.
I would never make it as a British person.
You never would.
Be rough.
I would not.
Oh, they have tomatoey beans. We do the brown sugar beans. So maybe you would like those beans.
I don't like tomatoes, so
you wouldn't.
Even worse.
Oh well, then you're doomed. That's half your breakfast gone.
When I lived over there for a little bit, I remember the first time someone had me try the perfect breakfast, and it was tomato beans. Mm-hmm. You would hate that.
Look, I am already ready to write off their entire country for putting beans on top of baked potatoes. What is wrong with you?
I'd try it.
I've had it because I had beans, I had potato, and I'm not going to waste the two. But,
They also put tuna on top of it.
It's not an or situation, it's an and.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not an or situation.
So, Chris, what was your favorite part or favorite visual?
Oh, I'm a sucker for Tina Turner. Everything she's in, I love, even if she's only in it for 20 seconds. Right. She's definitely my favorite part. I love the over-the-topness. I love And like the visuals that they chose to use for this like quote unquote drug den that they took him to.
I forgot about that.
I just assumed it was a red light district.
That's kind of what I thought too.
It's supposed to be kind of both, I think, from reading some of the synopsis online, because, like, honestly, I had a hard time following what was supposed to be going on at moments, and I had to read other people's interpretations. And so, like, it's the most pleasant version of it, and which I think is interesting, because I also know that this is the Who in the 70s, and they would have known what they, like, this wouldn't have been, like, a secret that none of the people working on this would have known what these sort of locations look like. And so to see their interpretation of what they think a desperate family where they would take their son for help.
Well, here's the thing. It's not they're taking him there for help. The dad's working there.
No, he is.
So is Tommy. So I think it's also to show the contrast of the sunny side that we met the stepfather in of, oh, it's a summer camp. It's great. Their life's going to be good because now that he has a father.
Sure.
Now they're having to work in kind of seedier joints that aren't like up to like what their dream was supposed to be.
Sure, but I also think it's less of just like, oh, what can we imagine a quote unquote seedy joint to look like? Because it's so different than what a lot of other movies would have portrayed a seedy joint as.
I know what it is. It's the very prudish side of like America, where like if we had one of those joints, they'd still be clothed up. On this one, we got titties out. We do
get titties, which does help the scene.
There are boobies.
I guess I missed that part.
Yep, there were boobies.
I'm gonna watch it a third time.
I was still trying to understand of like I was very confused on if Tommy worked there or not, or if the dad did. I thought Frank just took him there, and that Uncle Ernie worked there, and he was like whispering to Tina like, "Hey, I need you to take my my kid up there and like." Maybe you can knock it out of him or something.
Yeah,
give him that good stuff.
Oh, I don't like that wording.
What I think it is that they're all working there because they're all making the money to bring into the family. That's how they're having to survive. Is everyone has to work towards a common goal, kind of thing. And it just kind of happenstance that the Gypsy Queen is willing to take anyone that as long as you pay her first.
Right.
I don't know. It's weird treatment for deaf, mute, and blind kid.
Well. And I think so. That is my favorite scene in the movie too, just because it is trippy. There's a lot of cool imagery of like your kind of ego death, but also it starts leading into Tommy, the fracturing of him and mind, body, and spirit. And so we start seeing that in the mirror where he's like splitting into the three different Tommies, which is the Holy Trinity. There's a lot of cool like imagery that I think they did a really good job of like layering it on with making it like very visually all over the place too. True, also, the sarcophagus is hella cool.
The sarcophagus.
Yeah, I was going to say the Iron Maiden of acid needles or whatever that's supposed to be.
And also the largest needles known to man.
Well, it's also very phallic too because it's just straight up and down. There's no like detail to it. And then also the pumping in of the blood and how it rises up the sarcophagus.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
But also like weirdly medieval torture device.
Not really.
I mean, no, I know the history and it's a different argument for a different day, but like the idea of it being somewhat torture device shaped.
Yeah. For those at home unaware, Iron Maidens have been proven they were a sideshow thing. They weren't actually a real torture device. So
thanks, Victorians.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I always thought that those were real torture things.
The bull one, that one is real.
Yeah, the brazen bull or something. Yeah.
Stick them in the metal and cook them alive.
I will say some other scenes that I actually really enjoy is when we have young Tommy. First off, that little kid, I find some of his scenes hilarious because it feels like he was given almost no direction, just told to like sort of do something, and he does. When they're at the carnival, he just like, it's like, just walk off and pretend like you're blind, and he's just putting his arms out randomly, reaching for things. Then he's got the cube on his head that he's like shut off from the whole world. It's just a cube head. But then there's the great moment where he's in like the Hall of Mirrors, and his Frank and the mom come in, and he turns, and it's just him staring at himself in 4 different directions, and then all of a sudden it's a superimposed image of his head in a single ball that opens up to 2, and he's just got a weird smile on his face.
It's the start of him splitting internally.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's also like, I think it's Jim Henson who talks about like children, animals, and puppets are the worst to work with.
Yeah.
And while this kid didn't do the worst we've ever seen before in our lives, boy, this poor kid is the direction he was given was minimal.
It was very, very minimal.
I'd really get a kick out of watching him walk away, just reaching out at the like, different arcade machines.
Yeah. The one other thing I do like is how they do actually set up the story of Tommy too. Is he wants his own summer camp someday like that, and he does get it. But when he does get it in the form of like his whole cult, the music changes to be very circus-like again when his dad's groupies show up and start selling off merch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't like that.
Oh, I also like that Uncle Ernie is air quotes missing teeth, and they're just like black Sharpie painted over a couple of his teeth.
That was so clearly.
Yeah, that was, I think, one of the best special effects in this movie, because everything else is surprisingly like pretty well done as far as like 70s Photoshoppy trippiness. And then Ernie's teeth are just like some licorice pasted onto his tooth.
I think he was late that day to work. They were just like, we don't have time, man.
I like the Forrest Gump segment where he's just running forever through the ocean with fishes on lava, just all over the place.
Oh man, I had a thought on Forrest Gump on the Tina Turner part. I may be blind, deaf, and dumb, but I know where my dick's being sucked.
Honestly, there's quite a few moments in this movie that have Forrest Gump vibes, but where Forrest Gump gives you like warm, fuzzy feelings for this guy struggling through life, doing well eventually. This one, you're like, wow, now we're sad.
Now we're dear God, make me a bird so I can fly far, far away.
So we've talked. I know I've talked in depth about the meaning in this movie. It seems like maybe I'm the only one of us who actually saw some meaning in it. I don't know if you guys really saw, like, what was the point of it all?
It's the Who's musical.
Drugs, probably.
Shock value, maybe.
I'm sure they're trying to have some sort of message about
wokeness. That's my word.
Idolizing people or maybe celebrity or some other random stuff, but I don't know. It's pretty weird.
Yeah, I mean, I know I probably could argue that I've done the most going into like the old 70s and 80s rock bands and their like ideas of what it was to be revolutionary at the time, which now it's just, almost grandpa rock. It's not even dad rock anymore. And so we don't necessarily see it as like being revolutionary or fighting against anything in general. So like I can see the themes that they're definitely trying to put out there. I can see where Russell was trying to go with like different directions on how like the Who thought of themselves as having these big opinions on the world and justice and all those sort of like big concepts of the time. I just think it's much like the rest of classic rock. It has been lost because they no longer are the same style of aggression and complaint as it is today.
Is it maybe because they got too big and kind of feels like they sold out maybe?
I do think that's part of it. And I know like even at the time there was people who like example the Beatles, like when the Beatles got really big, even though they were arguably the biggest boy band ever to exist on the planet, there were people who felt like they like copped out a little bit by being as big as they were as far as like their message on peace and anti-war and their treatment of other people and justice
while being millionaires
and then going on to being terrible movie stars. But so I do think some of that is, but I really do think that it is because a lot of us grew up listening to what our dads considered their favorite rock.
Yeah,
like it's not punk, it's not grunge anymore because it's not your like rebellion song, which is like we're seeing it happen again. Like there's like there's songs that we grew up listening to that were like, yeah, this is clearly a song about like all of this stuff. It's so impactful, it's so meaningful to me. Like, I think the original version of Zombie is a good example.
Ooh,
and
yeah,
like,
that's a good one.
And like, like obviously for people our age who grew up listening to that and like listening to the aspects that song is talking about, and then even with the remake, like that happened during our time to people that we cared about, and it's talking about moments that were important to us. So obviously it means a lot. But like in like 10-20 years, kids aren't going to be like, wow, Zombie is like my anthem to like really express myself and the injustice in the world.
Right.
Fun little side note, there was a Census Fail cover of Salvation that I didn't know was a cover because I didn't know the Cranberries.
You didn't know the Cranberries?
No, and I listened to this. I listened to this song throughout college, and then I was in a bar in grad school, and they were playing that, and I'm like, oh, this is that Census Fail song. Is this a cover? And then I looked it up, and I'm like, oh,
no, it's sure not. But yeah, no, I think that's gonna like that's just how old rock bands are. Like even if they had a point like Queen and The Who both were well known for having big points that they brought up in their own songs and stuff.
That's true.
It's dad rock now, so like obviously I'm not going to take it serious. Like World War II's history book.
That's a good point.
So Maggie or Patrick, did you guys take any big lesson away from this movie?
I took away one really big lesson. I've played pinball before and I wasn't good at it, and I think it's stupid. It's a lot more difficult than it looks like. When was the last time you played pinball?
I don't know.
Actually, not too long ago, my brother's fiance, her dad is super into pinball, and he owns a couple machines.
Oh,
I was gonna say my best friend is like in leagues. Love you, Dina. But like she plays pinball, and occasionally I'll like try and be cool and keep up with her, and I realize I am also the worst at pinball.
Yeah, your husband even brought up that there's an app for like certain like marks, like where certain pinball machines are. If you ever want to like go on a pilgrimage.
What?
Yeah.
Like if you want to find like a certain like Kirby pinball machine, there's like an app where you can find one.
Yeah, like if you're trying to find like I don't know, like if you're trying to find the most
Godzilla.
Yeah, if you want to see like because there's like a new one I think that just came out.
No shit.
And like
that's cool.
Yeah, like there's some really cool ones, and I can understand, especially if you're like trying to hunt down like a long lost one that you like played as a kid, or like you've always been obsessed with like the Addams Family. They had a really famous pinball game.
Mm-hmm.
I could understand like trying to hunt it down, but I also suck at pinball.
Yeah, I'm not.
And I regularly waste $10 at like the bar that has them in Kansas City. So
can't do it. The movie made it look so easy.
Yeah.
Yes, the movie made it look so easy. So easy that a deaf, dumb, and blind kid could do it.
Well, the seeing, hearing, and speaking person can't play at all. So,
Patrick, any big takeaways from Tommy for you?
I mean, not that I already knew. Like, don't join a cult. Don't idolize a celebrity. Don't
do drugs.
Don't
do drugs.
Maybe do drugs. Maybe with Tina Turner. Maybe a little bit.
Maybe if Tina Turner's offering. That's different.
So I guess my last question for the movie: would y'all join a pinball cult?
My best friend may be already in one, so yes.
I was gonna say, yeah, she sounds like she's almost in one.
I tried, and I realized I was too bad at pinball to join.
For me, it's like conspiracy theories. I'd go for the spectacle, but unfortunately, people take it seriously.
They do take it very seriously. There's people who like there's stories to pinball machines.
Wait, but so what cult would you join? I know you join a movie cult.
Yeah, what cult are you joining? Because I feel like I would be easily swayed into a cult if the right circumstances arose.
Yeah, same.
Actually, about like 2-3 weeks ago, the lads and I were talking about starting a cult.
Y'all would make a shit cult. I'm not gonna lie to you. The four of you have very different cult energies.
Yeah, but that was the whole idea. Was it was just going to be something really dumb.
You'd have to have like sex of cult.
Yeah.
Yeah, different houses. You'd be sorted into the different houses of the Nicho cult.
I don't think I could join a cult. I don't think there's anything somebody could offer me that I'd be like, all right. I don't think there is.
I heard you.
Letterbox is enough of a cult as it is.
Letterbox is a cult.
So
Yeah.
I heard you earlier mentioning about those stray cats outside that I've been interested in. If they started a cult, I'd join it right now.
I already actually, now I think about it, and it has a lot of religious symbology that supposedly doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely in the cult of Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Yeah, you sure are. You're trying to convert people too.
I was gonna guess Harvest Moon or something.
Yes, I'm in the cult of that. I'm in the cult of Takashi Miike. Actually, I didn't start that one, but
you're definitely a heading member of Takashi Miike's cult.
Yeah. So I think good time for scoring the movie.
I think so.
So we have a good, bad, weird scale. You can rate any combination of the good, the bad, or the weird, or good, bad, good, weird.
A holy trifinity if you think it's if you think it's all of them.
Yeah. Good, bad, weird is our holy trifecta.
Weird.
That's totally fair.
It's weird. It's weird with a whisper of good.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. I've been waiting to do this. I've been waiting to do this because after we watched this, I was so excited because I already knew. I gotta hit it with that trifecta, baby. It's a good, bad, weird movie.
Good, bad, weird movie.
It is just it is bad but awesome and definitely weird.
Checks all them boxes.
It sure does.
What about you, Chris? Good, bad, weird?
I think gruntingly, I shall call it also the trifecta. Not because I enjoy it to the extent that I'm going to crown it and put it on the pedestal, but it truly does for me check all the boxes. It has plenty of bad moments and there's some pretty shit writing, there's some pretty bad acting. There's also lots of actually pretty good stuff. Mm-hmm. There's lots of really good visuals in it. The way they reworked the entire album to fit into an actual linear story was really impressive. But also, the entire thing is weird. So
weird.
I agree. I think it is the trifecta. It's going on a short pedestal next to the other trifectas, but it is on a pedestal.
And I think I got to do it the same thing too. I honestly watching this movie. It was the holy trifecta. I had no clue going into this movie what it would be about, at all.
Don't worry, nobody else did either, and they worked in it.
I honestly was not disappointed. I mean, it hit all those check boxes of. It's got good symbolism, imagery. It gets into that really weird of there are very few movies where I sit down and I'm like, what the fuck did I just watch? Right. That's why I had to watch it back to back, watch it for our screening and then Lads Night before I handed it off to Chris.
Yeah. No, that's totally understandable. I even had to look up bits to it, and I've seen this movie several times. And even after all of these years of watching it and having people in my life who are big Who fans trying to explain it to me, I still had to look up what the hell was happening.
It's definitely a movie that I feel like I would enjoy watching someone watch for the first time. Just watching someone's reaction, not knowing what it was going in. That'd be fun.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
I'm bringing it up for a friend's wedding, or I'm going up for a friend's wedding, but I'm making my family watch it. So
yeah, that's gonna be good.
Honestly, though, this is a solid one to make people watch. There's not a ton that's too over the top. Normally our perfect trifecta, it's not for everybody, and no movie's for everybody. But I do think this one you can get away with the few scenes that are a bit much. You can oh look what's that over there, and they miss a tit.
Yeah,
so they're good.
So
I mean, I was full on paying attention, and I still missed wherever these topless people were. I don't recall that at all.
There were posters in the store.
That's probably why, because they're posters.
So the other thing we ask is, would you recommend Tommy to people?
Oh yeah, I would. I mean, if my parents had me watch it when I was a kid, then you need to watch it too.
That's kind of tough because I do think, like Chris said, that this is certainly not for everybody. So I think if I knew what the person would like and could maybe appreciate it or at least laugh at how strange it is, then yes, but not just generally.
No, I'm taking everyone.
I think there's many people that I'd be like, you should watch this, and they'd watch it and go, what was that? That was dumb.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm in that same camp. It is one that I probably would be a little bit more selective with, but I do recommend giving this a watch at least. It is It is an experience, and I don't think I've seen another movie anywhere like it, to be honest.
Oh, I've got a list of 70s other rock bands who made a similar version, don't worry. Honestly, a lot of the Beatles' work. This was his thing. We'll get into Ringo's list one of these days. I know I've given you a taste.
Yeah, I've given myself a taste of Ringo. Patrick, I got one for you to watch, actually, from Ringo Starr. It's called Caveman.
Oh.
And there is not an actual word of, like, there's words, but there makes no sense.
It's like playing the game Caveman, but on the movie.
Interesting. Caveman.
I think for me, the qualifier for if someone should watch this movie is, hey, do you know the chorus line to that song Pinball Wizard?
Right, yeah.
And if they answer with yes, then without explanation, without any backstory, we're watching this movie, because then I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. For sure.
Like, even if you have a loose knowledge of who, like, music, I think that's where this movie is, like, no matter what issues you would normally have with it, then it's fun. If you don't know a lick of any Who lyric on the face of the earth, you've never heard of Pinball Wizard somehow, despite it being on the air for, like, 40 years. Like,
well, almost 80 years now.
Yeah, almost 80. Like, if somehow you have managed to flip through the classic rock channels and it's never been on, then you don't need to start now.
Yeah.
Sorry, 60 years. I'm wrong on my math there.
I wasn't ever going to find out.
I started to count. I was like, 80 years? I don't know.
That the movie's set 80 years ago.
It is.
I think my selling point I'd just lie to people and be like, oh, it stars Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson is in this movie.
Yeah. That's the other thing I forgot to bring up, is like just how much of a star-studded cast it is.
There's so many famous people in here for all of one song.
Yeah. You just gaslight someone into being like, this is a romance.
I did it with Dix the Musical. I can do it with this.
He did do that.
I still need to watch that one. I saw that one clip and I'm still very confused.
He basically held us hostage.
Everyone around me is held hostage too. I had my brother and his fiance watch Tetsuo the Iron Man, and they weren't super thrilled by that one.
It's okay. I hold my family hostage as well. We've watched the same movie for about a month straight every night. I'm sorry, loved ones.
I love doing that.
Thank you guys for being on the show. Go ahead and plug your guys' Chicken on a Stick.
Yeah, we're Chicken on a Stick podcast all over the place. You can find us on Twitch at Chicken on a Stick podcast, or like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm pretty sure it's all COAS_podcast. Mm-hmm. There's movie things. Oh, and YouTube too. You can go check out the episode we did with Nicho and Chris here, where we just talked about whatever we talked about.
Yeah, it's fun. We talk about all of our different opinions on movies. Sometimes we get into a little fight about who's right and who's wrong. I'm always right.
Maggie rates middle-aged men.
Yes, I do.
That did happen.
That's a thing that did happen. And it's a good list.
Yeah, it's always a good show. I enjoy checking it out on Friday. It's something I look forward to, like getting off of work and be like, all right, what are you guys watching this week?
Oh, thank you guys so much for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to talk about a very weird movie that I barely knew anything about before making y'all watch it.
It's a fun time.
Yeah.
Anywho, this has been the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Peace.
Bye.
Thank you for stopping by this here town of the good, the bad, and the weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, or TGTBTW for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always, check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace.